Okay, everybody, welcome back. This is the final session of today. Just a reminder about the code of conduct, and if you have any questions, again, put them in the Q&A box, please, and we'll get to them at the end. So we're very happy to have Sean Mongan with us today. Sean is a young Irish traveller and is now the Education Policy Officer at the Traveller Movement. Most of his work consists of writing reports, briefings, and conducting research on the issues faced by Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller communities facing in educational environments, with a particular focus on tackling the disproportionate exclusion rate. Sean graduated from University of Nottingham last year after studying politics and international relations, and he hopes to use a combination of his lived experience as a traveller and his experiences in mainstream educational environments to help drive positive change for young people from the RG/RIT communities. So Sean, welcome. It's lovely to have you here. And I'm going to pass straight over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks for the nice introduction as well. So as Claire said, I'm here to talk about the kind of issues that Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller young people face in education. I had a little section here for an introduction to myself, but I think Claire has done a good job of that. The only thing I'd probably add is that I started a year ago, straight out of university. I started as an intern, and then I was promoted a few months after to policy officer. So the Traveller Movement is a registered charity, a UK charity promoting inclusion and community engagement with Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish travellers. We seek to empower and support Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller communities to advocate for the full implementation of their human rights. Like it says there, our work covers education, criminal justice, public affairs, policy, women's work, and more. Mostly under my remit is the education work. The last 6 months, I want to say, I was working under a high-level kind of public affairs consultant. Policy work, criminal justice is what my line manager does, but I do a little bit of that as well. A really important distinction to make, because there's other traveller organisations that work with like an expanded group, I should say. We work with what we call ethnic travellers, which is, as you can tell, I've already said probably 4 or 5 times, Romani, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish travellers. Other organisations work with the likes of showmen and boat people. We specifically work with ethnic travellers, which is a key distinction to make, because a lot of the time the different groups kind of get grouped together, sometimes under the term traveller, which is what you see in the GRT acronym. Sometimes on the traveller, sometimes showmen and boat people can be included under that. Like I said there, the common use of the GRT acronym when talking about the communities leads to these groups typically getting bunched together, but it's crucial we distinguish the differences between them. So that's what I'm going to do first, and then I think, well, I don't think, I'm going to go over the issues that are facing our communities that we work with, and then I'm going to kind of dive into some of the solutions and that I've been working on personally. So first of all, Irish travellers like myself are of Celtic descent. Uh, their presence on the island of Ireland can be traced back to the 12th century, with large-scale migrations to Great Britain becoming more commonplace around the early 19th century onwards. Nomadic Irish travellers often move between the UK and Ireland. Per census data, there are around 30,000 Irish travellers permanently resident in Ireland, and as many as 300,000 in the UK. It's likely these figures are an underestimate. There's a lot of factors that go into that. The mistrust of institutions that this community has, a fear of revealing their ethnicity, out of fear of discrimination. And like it says there, they're protected against discrimination under the Equality Act of 2010. Yeah. Romani Gypsies, for those of you, I'm not sure who's in attendance, some of you who may have worked with these groups before might have referred to them as English Gypsies. But they have a long history of living in the UK, with historical sources indicating a Romani population in the British Isles as early as 1515, before the formulation of the United Kingdom. Recently, the excavation of a graveyard in Norwich uncovered mitochondrial DNA markers unique to Romani people, suggesting a Romani presence as early as the 11th century. The term gypsy is a derivative of Egyptian, which is what the settled population considered them to be based on their dark complexion. This misnomer and linguistic analysis of the Romani language suggests origination in North India in the 12th century. I will say, when I use the term settled people, that can be interchangeable with country people. That just means non-travelers, for those of you that don't know. Roma. This is an umbrella term for a number of different communities seen across Eastern Europe. They share the same ancestry as Romani Gypsies, linking back to Northwest India in the 12th century. However, their population in the UK is much more attributable to contemporary rather than historical patterns of migration. In particular, the impact of the genocide against these people and later the expansion of the EU into Eastern European countries has significantly influenced Roma migration into the UK. Uh, Many European Roma reject the term Gypsy due to the pejorative connotations associated with the word in Eastern Europe. Um, I know I was reading off slides there. I think it's good to know the differences between the different groups before we get into the issues that face them, because there is some different issues depending on which group you're talking about. There are, of course, commonalities between the groups, which is why they're grouped together. The importance of family and/or community networks, obviously a historically nomadic way of life, which obviously ties in with the tendency towards self-employment. Experience of disadvantage and prejudice, the worst educational outcomes of all ethnic groups, and across all social indicators. And nowadays, there's more crossovers between Romani Gypsies and Irish travellers than with Roma. You'll see a lot of Romani Gypsies or English Gypsies, some people call them, and Irish travellers even marrying in to each other's communities. You don't typically see that as much with Roma. Yeah. So these are some of the issues that these communities face when in education. Bullying, low attendance, social isolation, exclusion, low attainment, and criminal justice involvement. As it says there, so many of the issues may overlap, but this, from our research, is um, most young people that we work with report very, very similar issues. And that's kind of the bullet points I've made there. Um, so I'm going to break down each point and then kind of go into solutions afterwards. Uh, Bullying, like it says there, isn't limited to physical abuse from other students, the stereotypical you see in movies. It can take many different forms, verbal, emotional, and institutional. A lot of the young people that we work with report bullying from teachers in particular, sometimes even more so than their peers. Um, and their entire school experience is marked by racialized bullying, stereotyping, and exclusion. Um, the travel movement, we led a peer-led research project and revealed that 6-7% of young travelers reported being bullied by teachers due to their ethnicity. It's particularly concerning how frequently young people describe encountering ignorance and prejudice from the very adults meant to support and protect them. And because this bullying can be done by the teachers, it often goes unchallenged, further isolating and marginalizing young people from our communities. Typically, you find uh, a young person's word against a teacher, and as you can imagine, you can imagine how that would go if a young child is trying to argue against a teacher. Yeah, low attendance. There's a really, really harmful stereotype and narrative that goes about for these communities that they hold no value in education. Um, this, as it says there, ignores the real reason many young people disengage from school. Our report, Fought Not Taught, that released at the end of last year, kind of recognized that low attendance is often driven by factors like bullying, racialized treatment, and a lack of cultural understanding. Um, Young people from our communities are seen as a risk, which is one of the what we call mechanisms of coercive exclusions, which I'll get into a little bit later. Um, but these people are seen as a risk solely because of their ethnicity before the teachers have even had a chance to have a conversation with these students. They see on a sheet that they're registered down as one of these ethnicities, and they're seen as different. Like it says, they're leading to lower expectations, oversurveillance, and exclusions. That's just true the things that happen after, like that can happen after a decision maker or a teacher sees that um, a pupil is from one of these communities. Uh, Many families report schools failing to respect their culture or way of life. Nomadic traditions or early family roles, for instance, are misunderstood and punished rather than supported. And the curriculum also rarely reflects our histories, our contributions to society, which I'm sure many of you will know that applies for a lot of different communities, that lack of representation in the curriculum. and kind of how important it is to have that representation there. So low attendance is not about the lack of interest in education. It's a response to environments that feel unsafe and unwelcoming. Schools must build trust, represent GRT culture, and support pupils with respect and flexibility to change this pattern. Um, Social isolation. I think I've kind of this is actually from the report. This is a kind of a case study we used in our report. I won't read it line by line; it's too long. But basically, what happened was that there was a young child who was not allowed to sit at the table with some of his peers, because other parents had reported that they don't want their child sitting next to a member of one of these communities. It wasn't until the parent actually went in and complained that the child was allowed to sit back up at the table. But as you can imagine, for a young child, and that's clearly stayed with that child because this was reported a couple of years after, the effect that that would have, and kind of the mindset shift that would give you. You would value yourself as less. You'd see yourself as less. And to be honest, when I read this for the first time, I couldn't believe that this has actually happened. But that's kind of the social isolate. That's how social this is how social isolation can begin. There's a lot of if you're seen as less valued by teachers, then that's you're going to see that throughout your peers as well. They're not going to if you, and especially if it's your parents telling you not to associate with you as well, you're going to see these other community members as different from you, I think. Um, so exclusions, as I said in the introductory bio, a lot of my work is based around exclusions, or what we identified as the phenomenon of coercive exclusions. Um, this is a term we use to describe how schools, either through action or inaction, create a persistently toxic educational environment, forcing children and their families to withdraw from formal educational environments. This exclusion may not necessarily involve formal expulsion or suspension, but rather the creation of conditions that make it untenable or unsafe for Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller children to remain in school. There's a lot of words there, so I'm gonna, I think, break that down, and break down kind of the mechanisms or how this comes about. So one of them is we use the term institutional indifference. That's an ignorance that is not one of blissful unawareness or innocent absence of knowledge, but rather of rational calculation. For instance, despite numerous governmental departments, research papers, and international organizations calling for a whole governmental action to tackle disparities, there's been no such action taken. As I said earlier, every social indicator, every measurement in education, our communities are on the bottom of that list. It's clear. It's been that way for a number of years. Yet there isn't we're in the same position we've been in for the last God knows how many years. It's clear there's an issue there, and there's not really been a like a major approach try and solve it. In fact, if you actually look at kind of legislative changes more recently, it's doing the opposite. Um, when when Romy, Gypsy, Roma, or traveller people travel around the country, they used to be able to use, and they still can. Um, it's called the T code. But before this academic year, they removed any direct reference to these communities in reference to the T code, and they replaced it with the term mobile child. This obviously makes it more difficult for families to follow the legislation and correctly take their children out of schools when traveling. Another mechanism there is treating ethnicity as a risk factor. Those employed in education institutions often regard the cultures and traditions of these communities as a risk factor and liability to the development and growth of an individual. Uh, I was going to say more importantly, it's not more importantly, but it is important to note that a lot of these schools see these students as a risk kind of to their rankings and success on leaderboards. That is something I'll talk about a little bit after as well, in one of the solutions. But the focus was kind of like influencing the Ofsted inspection framework, I think, because under certain sections, obviously there's a lot of importance placed on academic results and attainment. But what we thought was because there was quite a high rate of exclusions and rate that parents were withdrawing their children from institutions, we were thinking that we make it mandatory for parents to report the reasons why, and then if they're negative reasons, have that as kind of like a grade or a marker for the Ofsted framework, so that they're not as um, incentivized to kind of off-roll students from these communities. Um, Another mechanism here is the low expectations that teachers have. I referenced that a few minutes ago as well. This is similar to the experience of other minority ethnic groups, particularly Black Caribbean boys within education. It's important to recognize that although social class is a huge indicator for teacher expectations, ethnicity and race can be determining factors in informing a teacher's view of a child and their capacity to achieve. Often it's particularly acute for Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller children who face intersecting inequalities and unchecked biases. There's also low literacy rates, which are really, really common in these communities. As it says there, form filling, communicating by email or reading letters can be really difficult for Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller parents, and certain help is not available to their children, such as assistance with homework. Accessing any core public service is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to navigate with the low literacy levels. Um, Obviously, that would hamper parents' ability to access educational support services for their child, and parents may be unaware of the support they can access. This issue is really compounded. Like I was saying earlier, certain issues that face each community differently. Many Roma parents either don't speak English or it's one of, like I said, there can be up to their fifth language, and that's an additional barrier that they face. Um, Low attainment, as I've said a few times now, any kind of educational outcomes, our communities are always at the bottom of that list. These are the actual numbers. I'm not sure how kind of well this will go across, or kind of the level of understanding. It's hard to understand just how bad it is just by looking at numbers, is what I'm trying to say, I think. But at primary school, only 18% of Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and 21% of Irish Travel children achieved the expected standard of development in comparison with 65% of all ethnic groups. At GCSE level, this picture is even worse. Indeed, the figures show that in the summer of 2023, only 16% of Roma, Gypsy, and Roma, and 31% of Irish Traveller attained GCSEs in English and Maths at grade 4 or above, which is what is described as a standard pass now. As I said, it's the lowest percentage of all ethnic groups, and these communities are also the least likely to continue past GCSE level. Criminal justice involvement. I'm sure many of you have heard of the school to prison pipeline. Um, for those of you that haven't, this is a term that describes the path from school exclusion to entry into prison. Increasingly, schools are moving towards no tolerance policies, which result in permanent exclusions, particularly for children from Gypsy, Roma, and Traveller and other ethnic minority backgrounds. The school to prison pipeline most severely impacts Gypsy, Roma, and Traveller children and Black Caribbean children, as both demographics are overrepresented in school exclusion and criminal justice population data, as seen in young offenders institutions. Um, this is a case study that was used from one of our reports here. I just want to see, I want to add that in there as well. That a young girl in her really early school years, and I've actually spoken to her myself. Recalled on a number of times she was pulled out of our class alone, separate from other students, and was asked really invasive, stereotype-driven questions about her home life, including whether she was being abused. What she took most from that, it wasn't necessarily, obviously she was concerned by the questions being asked, but she even recognized at a young age that she was pulled out on her own, and that's what stood with her more. The fact that she was on her own and these other children were allowed to stay in the class, and these police officers weren't asking these other pupils the questions. So these are some of the solutions that we're working towards. You find this in the uh, second report that we're releasing at the end of summer. This is the work I've been doing. Removal of zero tolerance policies, or at least kind of adapting them or changing them. Um, Obviously, because I know there's quite a big emphasis in some schools on their zero tolerance policies. But they significantly contribute to the disproportionate exclusions of our communities. They overlook cultural, social, and emotional context and reinforce a cycle of disengagement that can lead to long-term consequences such as becoming neat or entering the criminal justice system. Um, we're looking more at a shift towards early intervention. That's kind of what we recognise from conversation with the steering group and community members. Contextual understanding and proportionate discipline is essential. Yeah. We're also looking at different ways we can reform the curriculum to keep communities engaged. Quite obviously, and I think this goes for a lot of different communities as well. Make sure the curriculum is inclusive. It has to reflect history's cultures and contributions to foster belonging and visibility. Recognizing Gypsy Roma Travel History Month, which is this month. For those of you who do not know, June is Gypsy Roma Travel History Month. And using materials created by community members gives a sense of belonging, which enhances representation and engagement. Flexibility in the curriculum, especially at kind of a higher level in school, when you hit secondary school. Expanded to offer more vocational, practical, and apprenticeship-based routes that can align with Roma, Gypsy, Roma, and Irish traveller culture and economic contexts. These pathways must be meaningful and not seen as lower status. Greater flexibility encourages engagement by showing clear links between learning and future opportunities without reinforcing stereotypes. Qualification weight and a more balanced valuation of academic and vocational qualifications ensures all learning routes are respected. English and maths remain essential, but vocational alternative subjects must also be properly recognised. That was drawn on a point made by the difference in one of their reports. We kind of building on that point. What I will say is though about the flexible curriculum and qualification weighting for the solution, it's not about saying you're a traveller, you must do a vocational course, you must do some kind of hard labour. It's about giving them options. Obviously, like myself, I'm an Irish traveller. I went to university, but obviously there are a lot of other young travellers who don't want to go down that route. So it's just about providing them the options rather than forcing them down one particular route. Online resources, mobile or excluded Romani Gypsy, Roman Irish travel students need continued access to high quality online resources like Oak National Academy. Schools should promote these tools and ensure they are culturally inclusive and regularly updated. Online education should serve as a safety net to ensure exclusion does not end a pupil's education. Liaison officer reforms. What we found is after conversations with our steering group and many other education professionals is that when there's a dedicated liaison officer, typically what you find is the other teachers feel as though it's not their responsibility to look after children in certain ways and that they kind of palm them off to a liaison officer. So we suggested that like it's a shared responsibility, but obviously for like the logistics, appointing a race and social justice lead will provide that kind of coordination, and at the same time they can train up all the other staff to make sure that they have that level of cultural understanding as well. It would be impossible in many schools to have kind of a dedicated liaison officer for every ethnic minority, because in certain schools that we speak to, there could be up to 100 different ethnicities in there. So I think having that person dedicated there, but make sure that's a shared responsibility is really important. Um, Another point that was raised was cultural humility training. Uh, Before the conversation I had, it was typically referred to as cultural competency training. I think the importance of cultural humility training is that it kind of checks your biases rather than kind of educates you. Getting and typically it might not even be done by a community member. It might just be a so-called professional in this area that's delivering this training about a community that they don't really know much about in terms of their lived experience anyway. So making sure that the training is delivered by somebody with lived experience, um, and like it says there, making sure it's just a sustained commitment. It can't just be at the start of an academic year, we're going to do this 1 hour or 1 day training session, because then it's just a tick box. A lot of these teachers will do that and then forget within a couple of weeks anyway. So we suggest that it would be constantly refreshed, termly or whatever system works for each school, but to make sure that it's constantly refreshed. Um, yeah, so I'm currently developing a training resource for teachers and decision makers, which allow them to examine their biases and identify the term we coined, course of exclusions. I know that NEU got back to me recently. Before I started, actually, they began their work on resources and guidance in collaboration with us. I've drawn a lot of the information from that in our reports today. And we also have a caseworker who does all different kinds of cases based around discrimination with a particular focus on education. I think that's 25 minutes and that's done, I think. I think it's good timing.
That's great. Thanks for that, Sean. It's really interesting. I'm going to have a look at the questions. We've only got one in the box at the minute, but the
Mhm.
question is from Sharon Calvert, who is one of our members, who's also a Romani Gypsy, Roma traveller as well. She's saying years ago, traveller education services would go into schools to raise positive awareness of GRT. Given there are so few of these services left, what can we do as a union to support GRT staff and our GRT students?
Can you repeat that last bit at the end? Sorry, it cut out the last.
That's all right. What can we do as a union to support GRT staff and our GRT students?
Yeah, so the obviously the travel education services, I think it was about 10 years ago. I actually had access to one as well. A lot of them in a lot of councils have been shut down now. What we found is actually there's some, I don't want to say positives from it shutting down, but a lot of the time, like I said with the liaison officer, kind of ties in with the same point that what would happen is that a lot of teachers would kind of give up um, on these students, and they go, oh look, we have the travel education support services there. We don't need to kind of develop that cultural understanding or
Mm.
provide any help. So um, the question was, what can you do to provide GRT staff and pupils with the support? Is that correct?
Yeah, as a union, what can we do?
As a union, I think developing that cultural understanding when when provided any training or any resources, make sure it's been checked by people with lived experience. I think
Mhm.
that's really crucial as well. And something that I've seen more and more recently. Um, yeah, I think making sure that they know it's a shared responsibility, especially for any GRT staff you have. It's
Mm.
not what you find is that these other staff might just think there's an issue with a traveller child. It's not my responsibility. I'm just going to palm you off to this person. I think making sure they know that it should be a shared responsibility is really crucial. And then that person can then sort of train up other staff to develop that cultural
Mm.
understanding, I think.
I think you see that quite similarly with, for example, LGBTI staff who are the ones who are expected to do all the work in
Yeah.
schools around LGBTI. It's the same kind of principle, isn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. And I think as teachers, it's a shared responsibility anyway.
mm.
You should all have kind of a base level of understanding, or at least a willingness to learn to understand. Obviously, you can't be expected to be an expert in every field, but I think just having that willingness there is really important.
Um, Rob has put in quite a long question for, well, not long question, but he says, I hope this doesn't cause offence as I want to challenge generalisations. The only time, to my knowledge, I've taught Roma children was about a decade ago at a South Wales comprehensive. I taught a lovely girl, but along with her sister in a different year group, had extremely poor attendance. When I asked the head of year at the time about why her attendance was so low, as she did seem very engaged when she was present, I was told that the education welfare officer was struggling to get the girls in because they faced a cultural barrier with their family that believed their gender role was cooking and cleaning. They claimed there were similar issues with some Roma families at a neighbouring school. While I have no reason to believe the school, while I have no reason to believe the school tried to tackle non-attendance as they would for any family, there seemed to be an attitude of complacency to the situation, citing the cultural differences. My question is this a false perception of Roma communities? And how can this be sensitively tackled?
That's a good question. I think I can speak as an Irish traveller myself. I can't specifically speak for Roma. Um, but I think what you find is one of the earlier points that I made is that it's almost a cop out a lot of the times. Um, Teachers are sort of and decision makers. It ties in with a few of my points actually. I think typically our community members do have lower attendance and lower attainment, which is why what you find is that decision makers uh, they're almost ha or more content with allowing these pupils to be off roll or excluded without a teacher really trying to convince parents or whoever the carers are that they should remain in education because they perform typically worse on leaderboards. It's almost like they're content with allowing them to be taken out of school. Whereas I think and it ties in with that first point I made about the harmful narrative that there's no value in education. I think what you find is that more than almost anyone, these Roma communities value education. It might not necessarily align with the academic education that a lot of people see, but trust me, they have a lot of value in education. And I think it's about expanding the curriculum, like I said, to kind of include um, more kind of courses that align with the cultural values of of these communities. Um, I think I went off on a tangent. I can't remember what the exact question was, but I hope that kind of answers some of your question at least.
Yeah, yeah, you have. It was about the cultural stereotypes, I suppose, and the
Hmm.
perception of Roma communities, and how to tackle that. Um, Obviously, you went to university. Was that something that was common amongst your traveller friends, or was it something
No,
that came as a shock to your friends and your family when you chose to do
I'm the only one who's gone in my extended family.
that?
In fact, I think I'm the only one who has any GCSEs. I think. Oh,
Wow.
and my brother does actually. So we're the first two. Um, but yeah, nobody expected it really. And to be honest, with you, I wasn't even going to go to university myself. It's only that when I spoke to different teachers, and even in fact, like I can with the last question, I can tie into my own experience. When I was in primary school, I was dealing with a lot of issues, particularly from kind of year four upwards. Um, kind of bullying, racist comments being made towards me, and because of that, my mother and father wanted to put me out into home education.
Hmm.
It was only that obviously my parents were really young themselves; they wouldn't really know what to do. That the teacher requested because kind of I was intelligent as well and doing well in my exams that they almost begged my mum and dad to keep me in school, and that's kind of the thing that if you can develop that relationship with a teacher, I think that will improve the chances of keeping children from being withdrawn to home education. Because
Mm.
obviously we all agree that education is important. It's just that there's different issues that face different communities. But yeah, I was
Well,
the only one to go to university. Yeah.
on that kind of same topic, and I was going to ask you something similar to this question that's just come in myself. Moxie says, for you and your brother to have gained qualifications, what worked for you with the education system that doesn't seem to work for other members of GRT?
Um, that's a good question. I think developing not me specifically from my mother and father, developing a personal relationship with teachers that we can trust.
Mm,
So if there was any issues, my parents knew who they could go to. Um, and I think what you find is when you find and you see that in schools with a kind of high concentration of Gypsy Roma traveller pupils, is that when one teacher or one school develops these relationships with the family, they will send all of their children or try and get all of the children into that one school because they know that they're safe there and they develop that relationship. So I think I was quite lucky in the fact that there was a deputy head in my secondary school. I remember I was having issues with a few different children, particularly in year seven and year eight. And it was only that my mum and dad could speak to him that I was kind of not allowed to stay in school, but it made it easier for me to stay in school,
mm.
I think.
Well, they must be very proud.
No, I hope so anyway, I hope so.
We've not got any more questions in, but Sean, I really would like to thank you for coming and sharing that information with us. We started some work for our Gypsy Roman Traveller members a little while ago, so it's nice to have a refresh on that as
Mhm.
well, and to hear from you and the work about the work that you're doing, and from your own personal experience as well. It's really much appreciated. So thank you very much for giving up your time for us today.
I'm glad. I hope I wasn't too boring, when I was reading off the slides. I hope people learned some stuff as well.
No, absolutely fine. And it was, full of a lot of interesting information. What we will be doing is we'll be putting we're putting all of our sessions today on our website as well, so people will be able to watch it back and
Okay,
direct people
good.
to them as well. So
Okay, brilliant.
um, there'll be more people who'll be able to
Mhm.
get to watch it as well. So
Brilliant.
thank you very much
Thanks for having me.
for
Thank
your time
you.
today. No problem.
Bye bye.
And with that, we're finished for today. I hope you have enjoyed the sessions that we put on for you. I hope you found them informative and useful. And I look forward to seeing you in the next academic year for the next ETDD. Thanks a lot.